Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moments. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of upcoming episode of Soul Land 2 Part 139 based on novel. So let's start. Huayuhao's clothes almost instantly disintegrated into dust, revealing his body, which was a perfect fusion between energy and beauty. Sun patterns covered his tall and large frame, giving others a feeling of simple mystery. The vertical eye behind him gradually became a black hole as it consumed everything in the air. Even Elder Xian began to feel that his soul power and spiritual power wanted to leave his body, and he had to release even more soul power to control them. Time continued to pass. Huayuhao's trembling slowly stabilized, and the rose-gold colors in his eyes slowly dimmed as he gradually shut his eyes. However, the eye of destiny on his forehead became increasingly bright. The vertical eye contained the endless stars of the night sky, deep whirlpools, and uncountable worlds of radiant colors, as if the black hole contained everything in the world and beyond. Has he succeeded? Elder Xian was also a little nervous. He was still confident of pulling out the soul core in the first few seconds when Huayuhao was fusing with it, but even Elder Xian couldn't do anything in this moment. Huayuhao's fusion with his soul core was far too deep, and Elder Xian couldn't do anything to separate them. Otherwise, Huayuhao's own life would be at risk. Truly high risk but high reward. Elder Xian heaved a sigh inside. Far inside the great Star Doe forest, not even the beast god would have expected that his descent into Huayuhao's body had advanced his understanding of strength at that level, and Huayuhao was even bravely experimenting with it. The sun patterns began to ebb like tidewater. They receded as quickly as they had appeared, and even Huayuhao's skin faded away with the sun patterns as he shone with faint rose-gold colors. However, it seemed like his entire person was sublimating into itself. Huayuhao finally stopped trembling. The eye of destiny on his forehead gradually withdrew, and when its glow was extinguished in the end, all that was left was a black whirlpool that swirled continuously. There were fine and delicate rose-gold light patterns around the whirlpool. Every single line flashed and changed shape continuously, as if they were all cracks in space. The black whirlpool was clearly on Huayuhao's forehead, but one would feel that it in fact belonged to another world upon closer inspection. That mystical feeling transfixed Elder Xian's gaze. Huayuhao's fusion today had given him inspiration, a lot of inspiration at that. The black whirlpool was becoming smaller as it rotated until it finally disappeared in the end, and Huayuhao's forehead became clean once more. What was even stranger was that Huayuhao's aura vanished entirely along with the black whirlpool. He was sitting there like a rock, but also like clear spring. There wasn't a single trace of his own aura, as if his entire being had become illusory, as if Huayuhao had disappeared along with that black whirlpool into another world. Elder Xian took a deep breath. He knew that this little fellow had created something entirely new once more. According to his knowledge, nobody amongst human titled Dolor had ever successfully created a soul core above his dantian. There were three areas: the space between the eyebrows, the chest, and the abdomen. These locations were extremely important for a soul master toward his later years, and a soul master's soul power could only transform qualitatively by forming a soul core. This was at the core of being a titled Dolor. Soul beasts had a relatively easier time forming soul cores than soul masters. In the end, soul beasts' physiques were much stronger than those of humans. Diqian's soul power had been completely converted into soul cores, and there was nobody else like him in the world. Therefore, he was the most powerful individual amongst all the ultimate Dolor. In this moment, Huayuhao managed to create his first soul core as a seven-ringed soul sage. There was no question that his cultivation would improve at a rate far exceeding typical individuals. This was an unimaginable accomplishment. The only thing Elder Xian was worried about was whether Huayuhao could form his second soul core to become a titled Dolor after he reached rank 89. Elder Xian had been working towards creating his second soul core over all these years, but he was still one step away, even after all this time. It wasn't hard to imagine how difficult creating two soul cores was. However, Huayuhao had already chosen this path, and he could no longer regret his choice. Huayuhao seemed to enter a state of deep meditation as he sat there with his legs crossed. He didn't wake up, and his body was still filled with a feeling of illusion. Only a powerful individual like Elder Xian could feel the spatial power permeating around them. Having a soul core meant that one's martial soul could already absorb strength from the space all around them. The soul core wasn't just absorbing the origin energy of heaven and earth, the power of space was unlimited. This was the reason why the death god Doluo was so astonished when she discovered that the beast god had mastered spatial power. They were all ultimate Doluo. If Yi Shishui and the Darkness Holy Dragon were at the same standard, then Di Qian was at a standard several levels higher than them. The two of them had to rely on external objects to close this gap. Hui Yuhao could no longer feel that intense pain anymore, and in his daze, he felt as if he were entering another world. He was hovering in the darkness within this world, and there was no end to it, all was endless stars and night. He was trying very hard to control himself, but nothing responded to his attempts at all. He could only close the distance between his senses and everything around him when he fully concentrated on the stars above, and only then could he see this starry world. Space and light, this was everything he was feeling in this moment, and he seemed to feel as if everything that he was being purified. Everything around him was just so surreal. However, all this surrealness seemed to contain the profundities of heaven and earth. This feeling was both magical and painful. Hui Yuhao found himself immersed in those sensations. Ah? Yuhao is meditating at your place. Bei Bei stared at Elder Xian, who had personally arrived at the Tang sect. Bei Bei found that hard to believe, and he asked nervously, "Is he all right?" Elder Xian shook his head as he smiled and said, "Don't worry, he'll be fine. This is quite a big opportunity for him. You guys have to work hard, otherwise, Hui Yuhao will leave everyone in the dust in the not-too-distant future." Bei Bei forced a laugh and nodded as he said, "That fellow is truly a prodigy." Elder Xian said, "Don't make it sound like that. He has gone through much more pain and suffering, and he has put in a lot more effort than you guys have. Talent is one thing, and effort is another. You have too many things to deal with in the Tang sect. You should quickly share your burden with others so that you don't overlook your cultivation. You must understand that you have completely inherited Elder Mu's blood, and your future is boundless, so cultivation is the most important thing. At least, before soul tools can become stronger than an ultimate Doluo, we have to focus on our cultivation. That's the core of being a soul master." "Yes," Bei Bei said solemnly. Elder Xian then asked about the Tang sect's progress before he left. Bei Bei escorted Elder Xian, and then returned exasperatedly to where he dealt with the Tang sect's administrative items. He muttered under his breath, "I was hoping he could help share my burden. Looks like he's run away once again. Hopefully he can awaken from his meditation as soon as possible." However, Bei Bei didn't expect Hui Yuhao to meditate for a much longer time than he thought he would. A month passed in the blink of an eye. There was still no news from Hui Yuhao, and Bei Bei, Shu Sancha, and the others personally went to the Sea God's pavilion to visit him. They made sure that he was still meditating before they returned, assured. The others from the Tang sect didn't have such an easy time going into the Sea God's pavilion. However, there was one person who would discreetly visit the Sea God's pavilion, and Elder Xian didn't stop her. Tang Wutong stood silently inside the room. She was staring at Hui Yuhao, who was sitting there with his legs crossed and silent like a child. Her eyes were very gentle. She seemed to feel that mystical strength from Hui Yuhao's body, and this strength was faintly affecting her own soul power undulations. "This guy is sublimating." That was Tang Wutong's judgment. Tang Wutong had gone to the Tang sect after Hui Yuhao began to meditate for a week. She was there with a task from Elder Xian, and she was responsible for monitoring the Tang sect soul tool production. She unintentionally discovered that Hui Yuhao was meditating inside the Sea God's pavilion, and she went to find Elder Xian to ask if she could see him. Elder Xian didn't stop her, and he saw her figure very often ever since then. Tang Wutong didn't know what she felt towards Hui Yuhao. She had thought that he was a lecher when they first met, and then believed him to be brave and clever when they were at the Star Luo Empire's western front lines, and then she believed him to be affectionate and loyal when he saved her life against the death god. Even his story with Wang Dong'er made her feelings toward him transform continuously. Hui Yuhao had been sitting there peacefully over the past month, and Tang Wutong had already gotten used to watching his calm silence. Every time she returned after visiting him, she would become exceptionally concentrated when she meditated herself, and her cultivation became more effective than usual. She had gradually formed this habit. She was just standing there quietly, and an hour went by. I think it's time to leave. Tang Wutong suddenly realized that she didn't want to leave him behind. But she had to go back in the end. Over this period of time, after she experienced the battle at the Mingdo mountain range, much of her potential had been unleashed, and she was improving very quickly. I should go back. I don't know when he will wake up, or whether we will come together again in the future. Perhaps we will not. I pray that he finds Donga as soon as possible. Those thoughts passed through her head, but she suddenly felt a sour tinge in her thoughts. What is happening? Just as she was feeling a little dazed, a strange sensation suddenly appeared on her body. She realized to her surprise that her soul power was starting to circulate even though she didn't do it deliberately, as a layer of faint purplish gold light shone from her body. The soul power undulations weren't powerful, but they were definitely there. Tang Wutong felt her heart skip a beat while that strange feeling immediately disappeared. Losing control of one's soul power was an extremely frightening thing, and was something that nobody wanted to deal with. Tang Wutong suddenly felt everything light up in front of her in this moment. When she fixed her eyes once more, she witnessed Hui Yuhao's glowing eyes. What kind of eyes are those? They seem to contain the endless starry skies, and are so deep that the end cannot be seen. In that instant, Tang Wutong felt like her eyes were transfixed. Hui Yuhao's eyes weren't shining with any kind of light. However, the space between him and Tang Wutong still became very bright. This feeling was impossible to describe with words, as if there were an unknown source of light present at that location. Tang Wutong stared at his deep eyes that were like whirlpools, and she felt as if her brain had gone completely blank. The feeling of losing control over her soul power became increasingly evident, but everything seemed to calm down once more in the next moment. Waves of dragon roars resonated through her mind, and they were chiming with joy. Donga, Hui Yuhao stared blankly at Tang Wutong, who wasn't far from him, and was just standing there, staring at him in a daze. Hui Yuhao began to levitate from the ground just like that. The air on the sea god's island was very clean, so he was sparkling clean even though he had been meditating there for a month. Tang Wutong was wearing a blue gown today, and this was once Wang Donga's favorite color. Only thoughts of Donga resided in Hui Yuhao's mind in his moment. Hui Yuhao had been in deep meditation for over a month. He had gone back and forth through the brightness within those endless starry skies, but everything seemed to vanish the moment he saw Tang Wutong. In this exact moment, she was the only thing in his eyes, his alluring, familiar, and elegant goddess. The space around him seemed to change, and neither Hui Yuhao nor Tang Wutong knew how they closed the distance between one another. Hui Yuhao gently stretched out his arms and embraced her. He felt as if he had wrapped his arms around the entire world in that moment, as if he were the dictator of those boundless starry skies. Everything is just wonderful, just so wonderful. Tang Wutong was no longer staring at those bottomless eyes, while her own became agile and sensitive once more as she emerged from her dazed state. But she realized that she had melted into a warm and wide embrace. Donga, Donga, there was a gentle call in her ears, and that voice sounded like a dream. That voice sounded as if it were calling for a spirit from ancient years, and that voice which was so gentle and full of emotion made Tang Wutong a little intoxicated. She realized that she could no longer control herself, except it wasn't her soul power this time. She had lost control over her body. She raised her hand subconsciously. She was hesitant and jerky, but her hands kept moving forward, and she wrapped them around Hui Yuhao's broad waist. She closed her eyes in that moment, and all she felt was warmth, security, comfort, and intoxication. They were hugging each other so tightly in that moment, and the entire room seemed to glow. Hui Yuhao muttered under his breath, "Even though we are just in a dream, I am willing to remain in this dream forever. Please allow me to sleep for eternity if this a dream. Donga, I miss you so much. Did you know? I am but left with an empty vessel in the days that you've left my side. You've returned, and my spirit has returned. I love you, Donga. I am willing to love you with my everything to the end of eternity, and I am willing to burn my own life and soul so that we can be together. That is all I want. If this is a dream, let me remain in deep slumber. Tang Wutong was momentarily stunned, and her sensations of indulgence and immersion receded instinctively. He's calling her. Wang Donga. I am just his dream. I am just a shadow of her. A taste of bitterness appeared at the corner of her lips. She didn't want to leave this warm embrace, but she had no choice but to gently put down her hands that were tightly wrapped around him, no matter how much yearning she had to be in his arms. I'm sorry, I am Wutong. A gentle voice rang out beside Hui Yuhao's ears. This was like a thunderclap for him, and he subconsciously released his arms and floated backward like a lightning bolt. Tang Wutong no longer had anything to lean on as he shifted, and her elegant frame stumbled forward for a moment before she stabilized herself. Hui Yuhao's eyes were filled with hope and dreams before this, but they gradually dimmed as he stared at Tang Wutong in front of him. Tang Wutong turned her eyes aside. She seemed to lose her own spirit as he left her arms, and she appeared a little dazed. That empty feeling gave her unimaginable agony deep within her heart, and she felt like she wanted to die. Hui Yuhao's face was a little pale as he stared at Tang Wutong. Sorry, he said with difficulty. I'm the one who should be sorry. I startled you and woke you up from your dream. But I am not her, and I am sorry for making your sweet dream become a nightmare. Tang Wutong nodded gently in his direction before she swiftly turned around and glided away. She didn't give him another look from the beginning to the end. She didn't dare to look at him. She was afraid that his eyes would hook her spirit once more if that happened. Yes, she didn't dare. Hui Yuhao was just standing there as he watched her leave with listless eyes. There was an almost hysterical voice in his heart that was calling for him to hold on to her, but he remained standing there in the end, motionless. She's not her. She is Tang Wutong, and not my Donga. But why did our embrace feel so familiar? If she didn't say it, perhaps I would really have treated her as Donga. Where are you, Donga? Tears flowed down his cheeks like a waterfall. He clutched his fists tightly as he suddenly turned and stared outside the window. Hui Yuhao could see Tang Wutong, who was dashing away crazily. He could see the radiating purplish-green hues from her body, and an unknown force pulled at his body and his heart. He watched her until she disappeared beyond the horizon, and that figure that was identical to that of Donga's vanished just like that. Donga, Donga. In the Tang sect. Bam! Nan Chiuchio began to pout as she kicked away all the stones that were blocking her way. She had been very depressed over the past month. We had an agreement. We were supposed to return to my sect and explore the hidden area. But he didn't even say anything to me before he went into his closed-door cultivation. And he picked the right time for that as well. Is he deliberately trying to avoid me? We have already agreed on being brothers, so why is he dodging me? What an asshole. Everyone in the Tang sect had been very busy over the past month. They were either busy with administrative matters or cultivation. Nan Chiuchio was the same. She wasn't assigned much work because she had a very irritable and impatient personality. She was tasked to focus more on cultivation. However, cultivating for too long also made her feel frustrated and dull. She was really starting to find this loneliness unbearable. She was still walking forward as a figure blocked her path. Hey, get out of my way. Nan Chiuchio was already in a bad mood, and her hot temper immediately erupted. She didn't even lift her head as she exploded. You won't be able to marry in the future if you keep doing this. The person blocking her didn't move away, but instead quipped back at her. What the fuck does that have to do with you? Nan Chiuchio was furious. She raised her head and looked at the person blocking her way, and her eyes widened as her jaw dropped. Hui Yuhao stared at her with a faint smile on his face, but he sounded like he was chiding as he said, "Don't curse, you're a girl." Nan Chiuchio's sizzling fury from before was immediately extinguished. She was just now clearly full of complaints about this guy in front of her, but she now found herself unable to vent her anger when he was standing in front of her. Her voice was a lot lower than before. It's true anyway. Why do you care whether I can marry? HMPH, you still know how to come back. I'm sorry, Chiu Chiu, Hu Yuhao said apologetically, I didn't know this delay would be so long. I'm sorry. Nan Chiu's mood was instantly lifted when she heard Hu Yuhao apologize. She looked up at him and said, Are you still going? I've been waiting for you for more than a month. Hu Yuhao answered, Yes, of course we're going. We can leave at any time, I await your instruction. He even bowed at Nan Chiu as he spoke. Nan Chiu was elated. She placed her hands behind her back and nodded proudly as he said, Yes, that's much better. I will forgive you temporarily because of your good attitude, and I will think about how to deal with you according to how you behave later on. All right, Hu Yuhao stood up straight as he smiled and said, Let's go back to the Tang sect. I will report to eldest senior brother, and then I can leave with you. Yes? Nan Chiu acknowledged as she turned around and pranced back toward the Tang sect. However, she didn't notice the faint dash of loneliness deep within Hu Yuhao's smiling eyes. Hu Yuhao went to find Bei Bei immediately after returning to the Tang sect. Bei Bei appeared much better than he had 1 month ago. Xu Sancha and the others had helped share much of his burdens after they returned, and he finally had time to continue cultivating. You're finally awake, little junior brother. How was it? How much have you gained? Bei Bei spoke with pleasant surprise. Hu Yuhao nodded and answered, I have gained much. However, I can't duplicate it for everyone. Bei Bei shook his head with a smile on his face. That's nothing to worry about. Everyone has his or her own path. You have yours, and we have ours. Everyone's path is different, but we will all reach the same destination in the end, as long as we work hard and find the right direction, and if we don't take any shortcuts. Nan Chiu giggled from a side. Eldest senior brother, your words are starting to sound more and more philosophical. You live up to your name as the Tang sect's eldest senior brother. Bei Bei chuckled and said, Chiu, you taking Hu Yuhao back to your sect? We have delayed this matter for quite some time, and I am sorry for that. Do help me apologize to your sect leader. Nan Chiu nodded and said, It's fine. I've already told my mother, and she said that cultivation is more important and we can go at any time whenever Yuhao is free. My mother returned to our sect about half a month ago. I've heard that Dragon City, where the Earth Dragon sect is located, has been conquered by the Sun Moon Empire, and she wants to go back to deal with some administrative matters. She will withdraw all of the sect's resources this time and transfer them to Shrek. Hu Yuhao was momentarily shocked when he heard that the Sun Moon Empire had conquered Dragon City. He turned towards Bei Bei and asked, How is the war going, eldest senior brother? 1 month was quite a long time, and their situation could change in the blink of an eye. Bei Bei said, Don't worry, little junior brother. The situation is considered relatively stable. Ever since you guys helped the Star Luo Empire break through the Mingdo mountain range's defensive perimeter, the Star Luo Empire has unleashed an assault on all fronts against the Sun Moon Empire's territory. Even though their forward momentum isn't too quick, they've managed to disturb the Sun Moon Empire so that they have no choice but to turn back their soldiers to reinforce their own territory. The pressure on the Heavenly Soul Empire has been reduced. The Heavenly Soul Empire and the Do Ling Empire's reinforcements have rendezvoused, and they are trying their best to resist the Sun Moon Empire's pressure. Even though the Sun Moon Empire is still conquering more and more land, their speed has been considerably slowed. This has given us some time. Hu Yuhao heaved a sigh of relief when he heard Bei Bei's words. It seemed like the Star Luo Empire had been reasonably effective. Ultimate Doluo were indeed powerful, but the Death God Doluo couldn't rely on her own strength to cover the entire battlefield. Before they left back then, the White Tiger Duke had already decided on their direction to divide and conquer so that they could target the locations where the Sun Moon Empire lacked soldiers, and hence destroy all their legions in those areas. They harassed the Sun Moon Empire over large areas with small teams. Yi Shishui's individual strength was very powerful, but she couldn't cover every single spot. This should be the battle strategy that was effective in the end. The White Tiger Duke wasn't inferior to any of the Sun Moon Empire's commanders in terms of strategy and tactics. Bei Bei said, Even though you are unlikely to run into the Sun Moon Empire's main forces on your journey, you guys still have to be careful. You have to help the Earth Dragon sect's leader return to Shrek City while you explore their mysterious areas. Chiu, don't be unreasonable or playful with Hui Yu Hao, do you understand? Otherwise, I will confine you when you return. Nan Chiu stuck out her tongue and said, understood, eldest senior brother. Can you not see how obedient and lovable I am right now? Bei Bei stared at her as she attempted to act like she was aggrieved. He couldn't help but laugh as he said, you? Obedient and lovable? Heaven pity and protect us. All right, go and pack up, and then you can leave. Nan Chiu turned and darted away excitedly. She had been looking forward to going out to play for a long time. Hui Yu Hao chose to stay behind. He could tell from Bei Bei's eyes that his eldest senior brother had something to say to him. Yu Hao, help me look for the Blue Silver Emperor when you go to the Heavenly Soul Empire if it's possible. His eyes were full of lament and frustration when he said those words. He knew that their chances of finding the Blue Silver Emperor were very slim. In the end, the Great Star Doe Forest was already very helpful, but they still hadn't discovered anything yet. All they did was provide a lead that a certain soul beast had seen the Blue Silver Emperor within the Heavenly Soul Empire, and this was the reason why Bei Bei had brought it up to Hui Yu Hao. Hui Yu Hao nodded and said, definitely. Do you have solid leads regarding the Blue Silver Emperor, eldest senior brother? Bei Bei said, I don't have any proper leads. Someone from the Great Star Doe Forest mentioned some soul beasts have seen the Blue Silver Emperor in the Heavenly Soul Empire, but we don't have any precise leads. Oh, yes, if you have time, you can visit the Setting Sun Forest. I have kept Big Fur and Little Fur there, and it's been some time. I wonder how they are like. Big Fur and Little Fur were the two dark golden terraclaw bears that Hui Yu Hao and Wang Chua had rescued from evil soul masters a long time ago. They had been fed over the past few years, and were a lot larger than before. Bei Bei had left them in the Setting Sun Forest back then before he returned to the Tang sect to deal with administrative matters. All right, I'll take a look, Hui Yu Hao acknowledged. He couldn't help but think about Wang Chua, who had sacrificed herself for him, when he thought of Big Fur and Little Fur. Wang Chua was with him when they had rescued Big Fur and Little Fur. Bei Bei glanced at Hui Yu Hao and said, right, Yu Hao. I heard that Tang Wutong has been visiting you very often when you were meditating. Have you seen her? She even found an excuse to come to the Tang sect not long ago to look for you. Hui Yu Hao was momentarily stunned, and the image of Tang Wutong dashing away surfaced in his head. He nodded and said, I've met her already. Bei Bei contemplated for a moment. He wanted to say something and seemed very hesitant, but he kept his words to himself in the end. All right, little junior. Be careful on the road, and return as quickly as possible. If you can't find the Blue Silver Emperor, then forget it. As for Big Fur and Little Fur, you have to tell them not to destroy the immortal herbs around the Icefire Yin-Yang well. Hui Yu Hao nodded. He was all alone in this world, so there was nothing much for him to pack. He took a shower and changed into some clean clothes before he packed a few extra sets of clean clothes, some rations, and some water. He bid his farewells to his companions, and he went to see Xian Ziwen at night. Hui Yu Hao and Nan Chiu departed the Tang sect in the morning on the next day, and they went straight toward the Heavenly Soul Empire. Shrek Academy was positioned at the border between all three empires. They were originally within the Heavenly Soul Empire's borders, while Dragon City, which was where the Earth Dragon sect was located, was in the Heavenly Soul Empire's northeastern regions. They just had to proceed north from Shrek City to reach Dragon City. Hui Yu Hao and Nan Chiu activated their respective flying-type soul tools as they left Shrek City before they rose into the sky and traveled towards the north. Both of them felt very liberated as they left the city. The endless skies were just so clean, and everything flashed by past beneath them. Nan Chiu was flying beside Hui Yu Hao, and for some reason, she felt as if there was something different about him. He appeared a little more transcendent than before, of course, that was a good feeling, but Nan Chiu's heart sunk into a dilemma once again, since she had already given up on her feelings toward him. Can this guy stop being so outstanding? Yi Gai had gone into closed-door cultivation since they returned the last time, and she wasn't done yet. Nan Qiuqiu knew that she wanted to keep herself from seeing Hui Yuhao as much as possible so that he couldn't pull her heart along. Nan Qiuqiu also wanted to go into closed-door cultivation, but she couldn't stand all that loneliness. Furthermore, she still had to take Hui Yuhao to the Earth Dragon sect. She was still hoping deep within her heart that something would happen between them during their expedition. Hey! Why are you so taciturn? Nan Qiuqiu couldn't control herself anymore after flying for more than an hour. Hui Yuhao still seemed very casual and elegant as he flew in the sky, and he didn't make a sound. He turned towards her confusedly and said, "Why? What do you want to talk about? Don't you think the wind is very strong? Talking will waste soul power." Nan Qiuqiu was infuriated. "Then so be it. We should still chat, it'll be so boring otherwise." Hui Yuhao answered, "All right, let's chat." "About what?" Nan Qiuqiu was momentarily stunned as she said, "What did you gain from your deep meditation? Don't tell me you've had another breakthrough, and you're already at rank 80. I will truly be ashamed if that's the case." Hui Yuhao shook his head and said, "Of course not. Improving soul power requires continual accumulation. Even though I accumulate soul power relatively quickly, I can't reach rank 80 so fast. I still need some time." Nan Qiuqiu stared at him suspiciously. "Back in the Earth Dragon sect, my seniors all start shaking their heads when they talk about reaching rank 80 after breaking through rank 70, as if reaching rank 80 is very difficult. Why do you sound like your success will come naturally?" Hui Yuhao stared back at her exasperatedly. "With your talent, you will realize my words stand true when you reach my cultivation rank. However, Qiuqiu, I have to remind you that you have to pay attention to your spiritual power. When your strength reaches a certain standard in the future, spiritual power will be extremely important if you want to continue improving. Your strength will halt if you don't have sufficient spiritual power, and you will find it very difficult to continue breaking through." This was Hui Yuhao's greatest takeaway after completing his soul core. His tremendous spiritual power made up for his insufficient soul power. Furthermore, the greatest benefit of having formidable spiritual power was towards the soul core's stability. Hui Yuhao was just a soul sage. Even though he had twin martial souls and was stronger than normal soul sages, he was still a soul sage in the end. But his spiritual power far exceeded his soul power, and under such circumstances, his ability to control his soul power was far stronger than other soul masters. This was how he managed to unexpectedly create his soul core this time. Hui Yuhao understood very well that he would need even more spiritual power when he fused with his second soul core. Any soul master who wanted to fuse with their soul cores would need spiritual power as a shield to support them, and thus spiritual power was the most crucial component to his future advancements. Why couldn't Elder Xian fuse with his second soul core to become a true ultimate Doluo? A large part of that lay in his lack of spiritual power, in addition to his lack of opportunity and luck. Every attempt ended in complete failure, and at his level, he had to readjust himself for a long time after every failure before he could try again. His confidence would also be affected after experimenting too many times without success, and that was a very terrifying thing for soul masters. Nan Qiuqiu stared at Hui Yuhao's serious look and mumbled, "How do I train my spiritual power? I'm not a spiritual type soul master. I can't just try and control my soul power futilely." Hui Yuhao smiled and said, "You can't take shortcuts in cultivation. Actually, there are some methods that you can try to raise your spiritual power." Nan Qiuqiu's eyes glowed. "What methods?" She was very interested about becoming stronger, and this was especially so in a place like the Tang sect. The Tang sect was full of elites, and anyone could be left behind. This video will end here.